In this video, I'll demonstrate how to import MVN Animate motion capture data into Motionbuilder offline. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you are working with a offline processed motion capture file in MVN Animate. Next, go to File, Export. You can see Export File, Export All Open Files, Export Selection, and Batch Export. Export File is going to export the file that you have selected. Export All Open Files will export all open files within MVN Animate. Export Selection is going to export the selection that you've selected on your time slider. You could see mine's in blue. Batch Export is going to export every file located within your parent directory. So choose Export, and for me, I'm going to choose Export Selection. Now I want to choose where I'm going to export this particular file. So I'm going to choose my desktop in Motionbuilder offline workflow. Now I want to set how I want my export to be named and what it will be exported as. So right now it's going to be exporting as test2001 processed. I can append the suit name, or I can export the frame selection. So if I have export selection selected, it will say which frames I'm going to export. Now I want to choose what I want to export. So if BVH, C3D, FBX. For Motionbuilder and Maya, I like to choose FBX. And now I want to set up my FBX parameters. So if I choose to show options box down here at the bottom, I can set the downsampling skip factor. So with this file I recorded with an MVN link, I can downsample by 1, it will go to 120 frames a second. If I downsample by 2, it will go 60, and so on. Now if you recorded with an MVN window, that records at 60 frames a second, so that downsample would be from 30 then to 15, and so on. For Motionbuilder and Maya, you always want to start with the T-pose to characterize your character. So I like to make sure this box is selected, overwrite first frame with T-pose. And then output presets as a skeleton or default. I always choose skeleton, which is going to give me an HIK skeleton naming convention with a joint hierarchy. If I chose default, it's going to export an HIK naming convention on 23 locator nodes. So let's choose skeleton. I can change my output unit to change the size of my output or my export, and then by default dynamic and 0 at the time increment mode and start time is going to export the frames. Now if you had time code, you can choose fixed and real start time. This will actually export the time code. Let's leave it at dynamic and 0. Walk on spot would be if you're exporting for kind of a game and you wanted the character to stay at the origin. Okay, now that we have all our parameters set, let's hit export. Let's jump into Motionbuilder. Okay, now that I'm in Motionbuilder, I go to File, Motion File Import. I want to choose that file that I exported from MVN Animate and import it. You can see that the skeleton is imported. Now what I want to do is actually define this FBX skeleton from MVN Animate so it can transfer its motion data onto a 3D characterized character. So how I do that is I come into the character controls inside of Motionbuilder and define a skeleton. The character controls pops up a character definition window. What I want to do is come into the viewport and click the hip of the FBX skeleton that we imported, and then right click and assign the selected bone in the HIK naming convention of the character controls. Because this is an HIK naming convention, I could preload the HIK load skeleton definition, and it's going to drop in all of the skeleton joints of this character. So if I click through, you can see it's actually changing to the proper joint. Now before I lock down this character definition, I like to name it. So let's let's edit definitions, rename, and then let's call this the FBX raw. So we know that we're working with this skeleton when connecting it to a 3D character. Okay, now that we're all set, let's lock down that definition and define it as a biped. Now if we actually brought in some 3D characters that have also been characterized, let's just load this preset character from Motionbuilder. His name is Aragor. So character Aragor, I want to be driven by the FBX raw data. Now you can see that this character is actually being driven by what we exported from MVN Studio. From here you can bake the controls, or bake that connection onto a control rig. So if you wanted to actually manipulate some of the data, you can do that. Or if you are part of a studio, this is where the character rigger could have a script that writes it onto your custom control rig. And that's the offline process and how to import data from MVN Animate into Motionbuilder. Thank you for watching.